Hi friends, my name's Trish Roberts and you're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Excuse the odd hours that I do this, which would be odd hours on the east coast of the US. I live in the southern hemisphere, so I tend to, do these when I can, these vegan live streams. So I wanted to talk today about what's wrong with wool. And many may think that wool is a fairly harmless fiber and that there is no violence or any death involved in the production of wool, but that's not the case at all. So I just wanted to firstly just show this little image that that I think we should keep in mind when we think about animal exploitation. And this is something that we're brought up with when we're younger, happy animal slavery, happy animal exploitation, where when we're children, we're shown these sweet little books with a fantasy story about animals in happy animal farms, mom and pop farms, as if these farms are nothing. There's no abduction of children. There's no killing. There's no non-consensual exploitation. It's as if it's a non-abusive situation, and that's a complete fantasy. And that's what we're all raised to believe. And this image is really of lambs who are taken from their mothers. This is a regular thing, removed from their mothers. And as you can see, the mothers are completely distressed, and the lambs are absolutely distraught, being separated. And as you can see, they have marks on their backs, which means that they're going to be sold, and some of them possibly might be killed for meat. And then, their skin is cut off their back, and, these little lamb's wool shoes that people wear, Ugg boots or lamb's wool undergut blankets, and all of this lamb's wool that people sleep on with skin attached to it. That comes from those little lambs, and that's they're probably destined for that. So that's just a little glimpse into the wool industry and all industries that exploit animals. There is no such thing as a non-abusive animal industry. So really I was going to just read you, if I may, a very short description of the wool industry. And I'm not going to I never show any horrific images of animals, because I focus on the issue of use. The fact that we use them at all is problematic. I don't focus on how, because so much, even though I think it's important for people to know what these industries are, because people think that the dairy industry is not really abusive and there's no killing in that and so forth. People think that leather is just a byproduct of the meat industry, and that's actually not true. It is to a degree, but there's still animals that are killed directly for their skin. And so that's why I describe these industries, just so that we know that there are problems in all forms of animal products and animal use. So, but you won't find me sort of showing you any horror images, because I don't see the point in traumatizing people. And you can, if you want to see slaughterhouse videos, and by the way, there's no such thing as a non-abusive slaughterhouse. There's plenty on YouTube. There's plenty of animal horror stories they're actually just the normal use of animals. If you find, there's heaps and heaps of animal torture videos that are about industry, if you want to look at that. But I focus on animal use, period, that is wrong, using animals at all, no matter how much we think it's humane, which is a myth. And whatever, factory farming in quotes, or mom and pop farms. It's all problematic, and it's all abusive, and it's all wrong. So that's a vegan position. That's a non-speciesist vegan position. So that's what I focus on. So I'm going to just share with you this very short essay. You're welcome, Marianne. I'm surprised you're up at this time. I think it must be about 2 a.m., something like that, or 2:30 or something if you're on the East Coast. Anyway, so I'll share this essay. It's not very long, but it gives you a good idea about the wool industry. So here goes. And this is by Gentle World, which is a vegan intentional community, and it's written by Christine Wells, and I've been given permission to share some of the essays on this from their site, gentleworld.org. So this one is what's wrong with wool. Wool often tends to be overlooked by many animal advocates because its cultivation does not necessitate the death of the animal, unlike meat production or leather, for example. However, the cultivation of wool is far from the pastoral idyll one might imagine. Wool production is an industry. Like any other branch of animal agriculture, it thrives by commodifying animals and objectifying them as resources for human consumption. It converts sentient animals into units of production, thereby consigning them to brief lives of neglect and abuse and captivity in the service of increased profit margins. Moreover, just as the dairy industry implicitly supports the meat industry by supplying it with veal calves and female cows whose milk production levels have dropped, wool funnels sheep who are no longer producing profitable levels of wool into the meat industry, often through live export, which entails its own unique set of abhorrent practices. Ultimately, every shorn sheep will be brought to slaughter. One might also mistakenly believe that a sheep needs to be shorn, but the reality is more complicated. Undomesticated sheep produce only the amount of wool that they need to survive in their climate. Again, as we have bred chickens and cows to grow so large that their legs can no longer support them, we have used genetic engineering to manipulate the sheep's wool production to meet our designs. Today's domesticated sheep will overproduce wool in the abundance that is required to support the industry. We have, in effect, turned the sheep's body against the sheep. Shearing, which is in itself a brutal process in which frightened animals are forced into submission, occurs early in the spring, which leaves the sheep vulnerable to exposure. Deleterious breeding is certainly not the only way in which the sheep's body is assaulted to further human interests. About half of the world's merino wool comes from Australia, where the practice of mulesing is ubiquitous. Because of forced, unnatural breeding practices, these sheep have wrinkled skin in order to increase wool production. This wrinkled skin also accrues excess moisture, which in turn attracts flies. The flies lay eggs in the skin folds, and resulting maggots begin to consume the sheep's skin in the extremely painful condition known as fly strike. To prevent this from occurring, or rather to maintain their product using the most cost-effective means at their disposal, the wool industry cuts off the skin and flesh around a lamb's hindquarters, generally without anesthesia. And just stopping here for a moment, if you've ever seen that, the lambs are tied to posts on fences, and then and so their behinds are exposed, and then they're just, without any sort of anesthetic, big chunks of their flesh are cut off on their hinds. I mean, it's appalling. So that's something to remember. That happens to merino sheep, all the merino sheep in their lamb stage. Mulesing is likely the most widely protested aspect of wool production, and while it is certainly one of the most pronounced travesties of the industry, let us not forget that we cannot reduce the gross immorality and injustice of a thoroughly corrupt institution to only its most heinous acts. If we were to reform the industry by outlawing museling, we would still be left with a corrupt industry that subsists on the commodification of sentient animals. In other words, mulesing is a symptom of a larger problem, consigning a sentient being to the status of an item of property, so that he or she may be used in whatever manner benefits the owner. This cultural paradigm produces the very social conditions that make mulesing and other extreme rights violations possible. Wool is widely used in textile production, even in some cases where wool is not the primary fiber. You are likely to find it in clothes, bedding, and even carpets and mattresses in some parts of the world, such as New Zealand and other countries where wool production is prevalent. If you knit or crochet, wool is very frequently used in yarn. Alternative fabrics are widely available and include hemp or bamboo yarn, organic cotton, polyester fleece, synthetic shearling, soft acrylic, and faux fur. Now, I'll just stop here for a second. And for example, I use bamboo socks, and I wear these quite thick bamboo socks, and they're absolutely luxurious. They're really, really great. And there's fantastic hemp fibers. There's all sorts of alternatives to wool. And, you know, when people go into really extreme temperatures, they don't wear wool. They wear artificial fibers because they're actually warmer. You won't see anybody up in Mount Everest wearing wool, woolen fibers. I doubt anyway. So, you know, there's no need to be wearing wool, and there's plenty of faux products that look fantastic if you want to wear things that look like wool or whatever. There's plenty of, really great products now, and they're really beautiful. And so there's no need for us to be wearing animal products. So, and they note at the end of this, sheep are not the only animals used for their wool. Cashmere is derived from goats and Angora from rabbits. Alpaca wool is also increasing in popularity. If you do not want to contribute to the abusive industry of wool production, check clothing tags for any of these items before buying. And Gentle World states at the bottom, we are strongly in support of buying items secondhand wherever possible, and only buying items that are necessary. Although all of the above-mentioned fibers are vegan, they still have an environmental footprint, and buying used items is the only way to avoid this issue. So that's the essay by Christine Wells. And I just wanted to share a couple of images that I made last year. I tend to now do live streams, but I was doing these images for a while when I had a vegan page on Facebook, which actually had many thousands of people, and then Facebook changed the algorithms, and then it went from 58,000 and it started going backwards. But it was actually really, the numbers were really growing, every day. So that was a bit sad. But anyway, I used to make some images pretty much every day for that site. And, these are just images of sweet sheep. By the way, sheep are actually more intelligent than dogs even. A lot of people have been led to believe that sheep are, we like to use the word sheeple and, all sorts of things that are derogatory terms, speciesist terms for animals, like pigs. We say all these derogatory terms for pigs. But anyway, even if sheep weren't as more intelligent than dogs, it doesn't matter really. They don't have to be like us to deserve our regard. They don't have to be like us at all for all that matters is that they're sentient and that they're fellow earthlings. And so we should try and do our very best not to exploit them, and that means not eating, wearing, and using them. So, that's something that we can all do, and that means we can go vegan and then educate others to go vegan. I'll show you this one, which is very sweet. Look at this. They're just loving life, and they don't know that eventually they're going to be killed for their skin and for their flesh or whatever. And how sad is that? That we are doing this to innocent, vulnerable, sentient beings. And this one, it says, I am not property, I'm not a resource, I'm not a thing, I'm a person. Please respect me. And when we use the word person in relation to non-human animals, it just means, or moral persons, it just means that sentient being is not a thing. So that's what moral persons means. And here's another one that I did, which is why vegan? Isn't it obvious? I think it's pretty obvious, but of course, when one is completely, sort of indoctrinated in society to think that animals are here for our use, that's we don't see the very obvious sentience of animals, and we just sort of think to ourselves, well, these animals are here for us to use. They're our resources. That's what we're actually raised to believe. And, it's no surprise then that when we are raised to think that way, we're not going to, and of course it's convenient to think that way too. It's like the might makes right thing. And this one is, no one is free until we are all free. And that's true, until all sentient beings are free, no one is free, whether we realize it or not. And I'll just show you a couple more, and then I'll just wrap it up here. So this one I kind of like, which I did, and it's in a speciesist world, where we view these individuals as property, and then we view this one, and there's a little baby there, as the only one who belongs to the moral community. Isn't that true? And that's a sad thing, and that's because we've been indoctrinated to think that way. And of course, this one is this next one I'm going to show you. Basically, all are morally important, and it's true. The only place where these non-human animals do not have the same equal moral importance is in our minds. That's the only place that they don't have equal moral importance, because we've been indoctrinated. It's just like racism and heterosexism, and sexism. They're all forms of the same ignorance. It's all discriminations which are all related and all cause violence. And where we have one form, we'll have all forms. And just lastly, why vegan? Isn't it obvious? So that's really all I was basically going to talk about today. I thought I would specifically talk about wool, and I'm going to go through the various animal products and sort of basically show people that show us all that they're all problematic. All these animal products are all problematic. Whether these animals are raised on a mom and pop farm, or in these large factory farms, which means less and less these days, because free range, in quotes, is, they're just huge, massive windowless warehouses where the animals, like chickens, are allowed to sort of run around a little bit, and and there's still animals being trampled and dying of disease and all of that. It's all hideous and has to end, and we can end it. We don't have all this targeting animal businesses and whatever is a nonsense, because we're driving demand. If there's no demand for these animal products, then all these industries stop. All these businesses will be selling something else. It's just economics. No demand equals no supply. So, all these large animal groups telling people to stop supporting this industry and that industry, and Whole Foods is its humane standards are appalling, and all this kind of stuff. Targeting businesses is a nonsense, and also asking people to ask industry to make animal exploitation more humane is a nonsense as well, because there's no such thing as humane animal exploitation. And I've done a live stream about that on Real Progressives a couple of months ago, called Humane, What's in a Word, and I'll put a link to that, and I'd invite you to check it out, because it explains that there's no such thing as humane animal exploitation. So anyway, that's really all I wanted to talk about today, and I invite you to check out my How to Go Vegan podcast, which I think you might find very helpful. And being vegan is not difficult. It's much easier than people think. The food is there's so much variety, lots and lots of different cuisines. Excuse me. You'll never be bored, basically, with the sort of delightful and delicious and healthy food. I mean, you can have sort of delicious food, and it's still incredibly healthy at the same time. I mean, what could be better than that? And veganism is actually taking off. It's growing exponentially. It's not some sort of fringe thing. It's not some wacky diet. That's definitely what veganism isn't. It's an ethical position which rejects using animals for food. That's dairy, eggs, meat, and honey, clothing, wool, fur, leather, silk, etc., entertainment, and other reasons. So I invite you to consider going vegan. We don't need animal products to survive. We can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. And there's plenty of protein in these myths about, where do you get your protein? Please. Vegans get 75% more protein than they need every day. Where do animals get protein from? From plants. Where do fish get their omega-3 fats from? They get it from plants. You don't need to be eating fish who are sentient to get omega-3s. These complete mythical, these misinformation that's put out, even by the medical profession, about we need dairy for calcium and all of this. It's sort of, in some ways, I wouldn't say criminal, but it's incredible ignorance. But I mean, when I think about, if you look at nutritionfacts.org, that's a science-backed site that goes through all the medical journals and the nutrition journals and the cardiology journals, etc., and looks for results from human-based studies about nutrition and the effects of animal products and the benefits of a plant-based diet. It's a science-backed site. You'll find that animal products are so problematic, they just don't belong in our bodies in the amounts we eat them. Even in small amounts, it turns out that it's really problematic. In fact, I just want you to think about this for a second. There's a condition. It's called endotoxemia, where after we consume, flesh, right? After we consume flesh, which has actually got a lot of pathogens in it, even after it's cooked, and even after it's been sitting in our stomach acid for a while, the effects, what happens to our bodies is it releases this meat releases sort of this causes inflammation because it's got pathogens that are still in it. And it causes this inflammation in our body. And so every time we eat animal products, we're actually in this constant state of inflammation. And it just invites disease. It invites cancer because it's a constant state of inflammation. And that's just a little glimpse into how animal products don't belong in our bodies, because if it was normal, if it was supposed to be there, our bodies wouldn't be trying to reject them like they are, and it wouldn't be causing inflammation as it is. So I'm going to do actually a talk about endotoxemia. That's what it's called. And I'm also going to do include, if I can, it's a bit tricky, but I'm going to include some other things, that dairy, the problems with dairy and how it's contributing to breast cancer. And I've got a little cat walking by here. So there's a whole lot of problems with animal products that I think that if one did the research through, say, this nutritionfacts.org, you'd be kind of horrified, and probably it's like consuming toxins every day. So that's an ancillary benefit, health. But the most important reason to be vegan, the reason to be vegan, is because non-human animals are not our property. They're not our resources. They're sentient beings, just like we are, who love life and do not want to die. And we can stop this terrible violence right now by going vegan. We can stop the violence to our bodies. We can stop the violence to other sentient animals. We can stop violence to the environment, because 51% of greenhouse gases are from animal agriculture, and all that means, all that climate change means, the 6th mass extinction and the climate refugees and all of that. We can stop all of that in our own lives just by simply making that ethical decision to stop using sentient animals as things. We can do all of that. We can address not only the violence of the 1 trillion land and aquatic animals killed every year, tortured and killed every year for trivial reasons of mostly palate pleasure, habit, tradition, and convenience. And we can address climate change in our own lives, and we don't need any corporations or businesses to do that. And we can stop the violence to our own bodies, the constant stress we're putting our bodies under every time we consume an animal product, even in small amounts. Even if we do this thing of, I don't eat much meat, I don't eat much dairy, you'd be surprised, even just in small amounts, how problematic it is for our bodies. So all those things, I mean, what's stopping us, when all of this is all of this we can do right now for, there's nothing elitist about being vegan. It's not expensive. It's, in fact, a lot of countries before they were influenced by Western food, our Western culture, which is a lot of animal products. They were basically plant-based, like China. And since China has been upping its animal products, there's lots and lots of children that have got diabetes. There's a huge amount of problems now, health problems in China. And to the extent that China's actually, I think, decided to cut meat, that they want everybody to cut meat in consumption in half or something. They recognize how problematic it is. But if you've ever read the China study, which is the largest nutrition study ever undertaken, and they actually did most of that in China, there was almost a lot of the Western diseases were virtually unknown in China before they started, consuming animal products like we do. So, and you can also check out the book "How Not to Die" by Dr. Michael Greger, which is an excellent book as well. That you might find that very interesting. Anyway, so anyway, that's basically it for wool at the moment, and I hope that you will consider going vegan. And thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Till next time. Bye for now.